Senator Titus is here, and I want to be respectful of his time. So I think we're going to have the hearing on Senate Bill 1 first, and then work Senate Bill 4 at the end of the day here. So first, I'll have Jason give us a quick overview of Senate Bill 1. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 1 deals with establishing the standard time for the entire state of Kansas. Under federal law establishes standard time as the official time for the United States, and then establishes daylight savings time for that period, as you well know, from approximately March to November, when we move the clocks, and then we return to standard time. Federal law allows a state to opt out of daylight saving time, and so the state can, of its own volition, just observe standard time year-round. I believe Arizona is the only full state that does so currently, and there are portions of, I believe, Indiana that do so as well. Senate Bill 1 would have Kansas join Arizona in that, on 2 a.m. on the first Sunday of November in 2025, the state of Kansas would just continue to observe standard time year-round from that date going forward. And so in the spring of 26, there would be no time change to daylight saving time if Senate Bill 1 were to be passed and in effect. The wrinkle to Senate Bill 1 is that it has a conditional provision that if Congress acts, because they are considering various legislation on this issue, if Congress acts to change the federal law so that daylight saving time becomes the permanent year-round time for the United States, then Kansas law would change accordingly upon enactment of that federal law to also observe daylight savings time year-round as well. And so you will see two additional sections in the bill. Section 2 simply directs the Secretary of State to follow the actions of the federal Congress, and if such an act were to pass establishing daylight saving time, then notice of that passage is to be published in the Kansas Register, which would then trigger the effective date of Section 3, which would then establish daylight saving time as the permanent year-round time for observation for the state of Kansas. Again, Section 3 wouldn't go into effect until there's passage of federal law to that effect. Otherwise, under Senate Bill 1, we would be observing standard time on a permanent basis year-round in the state of Kansas. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Committee, any questions for our reviser? Seeing none, I think we're good. We have a couple proponents and a couple opponents, so I think what I'm going to do is allot a total of 10-minute block for each. And so we won't restrict any one testimony, but just bear in mind that you'll have a total of 10 minutes for the proponents, 10 for the opponents. There are no neutral on this one. So up first, we have in-person testimony from Senator Titus from District 18. And Senator, welcome to Fed and State, and your time begins now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today. Just a little background, this bill essentially came from the request of several constituents that wanted us to explore the issue, and so I thought it was something that, given that there had been some national attention in the last couple of years, I thought it was a good time as a state to take a look at this and explore the issue. So that's sort of the motivation for introducing this bill. As Revisor Long mentioned, as a state, we really only have one option under the current federal law, and that's to opt out of daylight savings time. So when looking at how to put this together, if we want to stop changing clocks, then going to permanent standard time is the option on the table for us. So when this bill went out, I got calls and emails from people all over the state sharing their opinions. And I can say, of course, this is anecdotal, but one thing that 98% of the people that reached out to me agreed on is they love the idea of not changing their clocks. almost nobody disagrees with that. Where it's a little murkier is, should we be on permanent daylight time or permanent standard time? And from my unofficial survey, I couldn't get a clear consensus, maybe a little bit more one way or the other, but that's really where people are divided. So one of the things I did when I decided to bring this forward is I wanted to look at the research and say which would be better, and is this a good idea? And if you look at the material and the research and the data that's available, there's a nearly universal consensus among health experts that standard time is better for us because it aligns with our circadian rhythms and our sleep cycles. And it just sort of fits the way people naturally want to wake up and go to sleep. But the benefits that spin from that, it leads to mental health benefits. It reduces vehicle accidents. And the other thing, it is better for children, for their educational outcomes where that's been measured. So that's really the main reason I decided that this was a good idea to really take a look at standard time, because it's healthier. Some of the things you'll hear about daylight time is they'll actually bring a lot of the same arguments and say all of those things are better under daylight time. However, I've provided a number of references in my written testimony. You can look at that. There's a lot of people that feel that way, but there isn't data that supports that position. So the other things I would point out when you hear the testimony about permanent daylight time as something we should maybe wait for, this was tried in 1974 during the oil crisis. President Nixon put it in place, and it was so unpopular that it was revoked within a year almost. Before, I found some old polling, and before that went into effect, 79% of the public thought it was a great idea. After one winter on permanent daylight savings time, support for that position was 42%. And the main reason was, if you walk outside at 7 a.m. now and pretend that it's 8 o'clock, you'll see it's pitch black, and we're sending kids to school in the dark every day, and it really became a safety issue. So I don't think anything has really changed, so I don't think permanent daylight time is a viable option. So if we want to get out of the clock switching business, I think this is our first approach. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, I think we'll have testimony. Well, actually, because you may have another committee, any questions for Senator Titus at this point? Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Titus. So how would this affect, and maybe it will, maybe it won't, but how would it affect, so automatically, our cell phones, it changes the time. How, and would this be, whereas employers who are, would they be required to follow the rules of Senate Bill 1? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Senator Goodell. The cell phones have the geofencing and all of that works. People in Arizona aren't having the wrong times on their phones all the time, so the technology piece will work itself out. As to employers, they can. The time on the clock will be the time on the clock. They can certainly set the work hours they want. But, I'd point out there are these boundaries that already exist. We have, I think, 4 counties that are on mountain time, and they seem to manage the difference. There are, that Illinois-Indiana line. There are states that people work across metro areas where this is already an issue, and folks have found a way to manage it.
Just to follow up, Mr. Chairman, and I do agree with you, because I leave out like at 5 in the morning just to go to McDonald's for coffee, and I'll sometimes sit there in my vehicle just to watch out for the kiddos that are on the bus stop, and it's still so dark, so I agree with you there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. Appreciate it very much. Next up, we have JP. From Save Standard Time, and Jay is on WebEx. And Jay, welcome to committee.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me well enough?
Yes, we're in good shape. Thank you.
Okay. Chair Thompson, Vice Chair Blue, Member Foscato, thank you for having me here. My name is JP. Last name is spelled PEA. I'm the president of Save Standard Time. I'm also the co-chair for the Coalition for Permanent Standard Time. I've been working on this issue since 2019. I want to say yes on SB 1 from Senator Titus, and I want to thank the author for bringing this bill forward. Standard time is the honest-to-God sundial time where 12 p.m., corresponds closely to high noon. It's what my great-grandfather, who was a farmer, taught me to tell the time from the sun's position in the sky. It balances the morning and the evening light for all walks of life. And that morning light is especially important for school children, for commuters, for farmers, construction workers, for service personnel, for everybody who has to get up and go to work or school in the morning. They need that morning sunlight to feel awake and alert, to perform well, and to be safe. This permanent standard time is endorsed by the National Safety Council, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, even Bloomberg editorial board, many journalists on the left and the right. There are hundreds of studies spanning decades of history showing this is the healthiest, safest way to go. It's been long observed in Arizona, Hawaii, the 5 U.S. territories, most nations on Earth, and Mexico just restored permanent standard time just a couple of years ago. More states now have bills just like this across the country than ever before. I think we're up to 20 now. This includes Arkansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Texas, Utah just yesterday passed this same bill through committee. Every state in the Pacific time zone is considering this. Governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, has said he supports it. The Texas Agriculture Commissioner, Sid Miller, says he supports it. Even President Trump has said he wants to eliminate daylight saving time. It is federally pre-approved for you right now. This is how the law is designed. Now, I know some people will say they want permanent daylight time, but that cannot magically turn the winter into summer. Summer will always happen. Winter will always happen. Daylight saving time is simply a mandate to wake early. You turn your clock ahead an hour, your alarm the next morning sounds an hour earlier and every day after until you put your clock back to standard time. Permanent daylight time would put the sunrise past 8 o'clock in the morning for 3 to 4 months in Kansas. It would make the sunrise as late as 9 o'clock in the morning. Your sunrise in Topeka today was 7:37 a.m. Central Standard Time. Permanent daylight time would make that 8:37. It does not go well. People need to have that morning light. So yes, standard time keeps the morning light. It's federally pre-approved. It's best for health. Cell phones and computers know how to adjust for the time zone. So this would be great. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any, and I thank you again for considering this bill yes on SB 1.
Thank you, Jay. Committee, any questions for Jay? Seeing none, appreciate your testimony, sir.
Thanks again.
We have proponent written testimony available in your S drive from 4 different folks. And so you can review that, committee, at your leisure. Next, and again, there's no neutral testimony, so opponent in person, we have Clay Barker from the Deputy Secretary of State, and we'll give a 10-minute block there. So,
right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my testimony will be short. We have no position whatsoever on the standard times, daylight time issue. Our only concern was Section 2A that puts the Secretary of State in charge of monitoring federal law. And first of all, if this becomes law, we'll, of course, get it done. I'd imagine if this becomes a federal law, it will be such national-wide news, everyone knows it. Our concern was if this gets buried in some sort of omnibus bill, and we don't have the capacity or the experience of monitoring the feds. None of our agencies, except a little bit with elections, actually interacts with them. And I didn't know if there was a better agency to monitor it. I assume we were named in here because we control the Kansas Register and would publish it. But that's our only concern, Mr. Chair.
okay, thank you, Clay. Committee, any questions for Clay while he's up there? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is an excellent point. So what agency would you recommend?
Senator, I don't know who to pass it off to. I don't know what agency in the federal or in the state government spends a lot of time monitoring federal activity. I assume something like this would have to percolate through committees. There'd be early warning. And again, it may be such important national news, we'd all know about it before it happened.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Gossage.
She took my question.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
Any others? Seeing none, thank you, Clay. Appreciate it. Okay, next up, and I'm going to butcher the last name here, Allison. Allison Mazzei, okay, of Kansas Association of Broadcasters. Allison, welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And
Actually, my testimony is neutral, so I apologize if that's something we need to correct on our end. But as you said, I'm Allison Mazzei. I'm president of the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, representing 260 member stations across Kansas. Today, I'm here to provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 1. And we're neutral because we understand that the majority of people support the idea of permanent daylight saving time for its potential convenience, sunlight, and consistency. However, as a representative of Kansas broadcasters, we must raise important concerns about its unintended consequences for AM radio stations and the communities they serve. A move to permanent daylight savings time would delay sunrise times during fall and winter months, pushing back the hours when AM radio stations are allowed to operate at full power. These restrictions are set by FCC regulations to prevent signal interference with other AM radio stations, as AM radio waves travel much further at night due to atmospheric conditions. Without adjustments to these rules, many AM stations would lose significant portions of their critical morning drives, moments when communities rely on updates like school closings, weather alerts, and local news. Kansas has 28 AM stations with daytime and nighttime coverage differences, most of which serve rural areas where access to reliable information is limited. For an example of this, please see the coverage maps included in my written testimony that show the difference of daytime versus nighttime coverage areas for KFRM, an AM station in Clay Center. Past FCC actions, such as those following the Energy Policy Act of 2005, have shown that obtaining timely and effective regulatory change is not guaranteed. This makes it essential that any move toward permanent daylight saving time be preceded by regulatory updates to sunrise and sunset operating times. We urge the committee to ensure that these critical issues are addressed in collaboration with the FCC before any permanent time changes are made. Thank you, and I am here to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Allison. Senator Gossage.
When I read your testimony, I thought maybe they didn't understand the bill. The way I understand the bill is we would be exempt from daylight savings time, so it would be permanent standard time.
Moving the clock forward and backward, or not moving the clock
We
forward
have
and
standard time, as the revisor was saying. So what I'm hearing you say is permanent daylight savings time, and there's daylight savings time, which is that March through November time where we change our clocks. That's daylight savings time. Otherwise, it's considered standard time. So we as a state have a right to change to full standard time without changing any clocks.
Correct. I'll look and ensure I didn't use the incorrect phrasing, but if sunrise and sunset times change and we're inconsistent with the rest of the nation, it would still affect those coverage times because it's set on, you turn down the dial on how far your signal can go depending on the time of when the sun rises. So we'll go back and I'll confer with my lobbyists to ensure we're understanding it correctly, but
yes,
this is something to consider that's pretty niche, that most people, an industry that people aren't considering when looking at changing our sunrise and sunset times.
Thank you for your testimony. I just wanted to clarify. So yes, if you could clarify with them, it would not be.
All right, thank you.
We don't have that option. I have several of my constituents who said, if they're going to change it, please make it permanent daylight savings time. I prefer that. And then others who said, no, I want permanent standard. We don't have the option, as we heard, to go to permanent daylight savings time, only permanent standard. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a quick interesting comment. So I work outside of legislature for a company that's based out of California. So it's interesting. We operate on their time, so we work 10 to 7. So this is actually going to be quite fun because at some point we'll switch to 9 to 6 and then back to 10 to 7. And so that'll raise all kinds of fun for some people at work that are set on that time. But that's besides the point. Enough about me. Question for you. I haven't heard anybody talk about money. And I've heard when they talk about the feds removing this or changing the time. At one point a couple of years ago, I can't remember, somebody explained to me there was actually a cost savings to doing this, but I haven't heard anybody talk about it today. So I'd be interested to know if there's any financial benefit to doing this or not. And that's just a general question, really, to anybody.
I don't know if you can comment on that, Allison, or not. I do know, for example, I worked in the broadcast industry on radio and television. Clear channels, and I think they still exist, are a big deal, which is what you were talking about, reducing the AM power. But also, if you're near a state line, I've heard from broadcasters who their clock would change, even the FM radio, because if they're broadcasting over into Missouri, for example, a morning show which might have higher ad rates would have to either expand their show so that they wouldn't be affecting their clock in Missouri. Is that what you're hearing from your broadcasters?
Well, and something to consider kind of along that is the Kansas City Metro. It just makes it hard when it's kind of patchwork state by state and we're not all following the same time zone or same time standards. It's really problematic given that our coverages extend into multiple states. So the broadcasters would have to follow whatever state they're licensed to. But that would affect, our border areas quite a bit. And given that we have such a large metro spanning 2 states, it's
And stations in both states broadcasting their footprint either way.
Right.
Yeah. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to comment on this, but coming from the technology industry, there are many unintended consequences with this. Many software updates, many systems have to be, and if we look nationwide, I'm not trying to rain on this bill by any means, just pointing out a fact that Indiana and Arizona were the only 2 states in the nation that did not recognize daylight savings time. And a few years ago, Indiana joined the rest of the states, and they said it was a positive economic impact to their state when they came in with the rest of the nation. So I love the idea. I'm hoping the nation moves on it. I caution Kansas as being one of the first ones to move alone. But I don't want to kill his bill. So thank you.
Any other questions for Allison? Senator Gossage.
Not necessarily for Allison, just a comment, and that is I have a son who lives in Arizona, and his business is all over the country, and he has employees that are all over the country, but it's just pretty much everybody knows, okay, that's Arizona. And here in Kansas, we have 2 different time zones. We have some people out in western Kansas that are in the Rocky Mountain time zone, and they already have to deal with, okay, we're in a different time zone than the rest of Kansas. But I know that my constituents, by and large, when Senator Titus put this out earlier, I just kind of reached out to my constituents, what are your thoughts? Overwhelmingly was, I'm tired of having to change my clock. Let's just have one or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other? Seeing none, thank you, Allison. Appreciate it very much. Okay, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 1, and we're going to move to